This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please go to LibriVox.org. Recording by Andy Minter. Some Experiences of an Irish R.M. by Edith Enoni Somerville and Martin Ross. Chapter 2. In the Curranhilty country. It is hardly credible that I should have been induced to depart from my usual walk of life by a creature so uninspiring as the grey horse that I bought from Flurry Knox for £25. Perhaps it was the monotony of being questioned by every other person with whom I had 5 minutes' conversation as to when I was coming out with the hounds, and being further informed that in the days when Captain Brown, the late coastguard officer, had owned the grey, there was not a fence between this and Mallow big enough to please them. At all events, there came an epoch-making day when I mounted the Quaker and presented myself at a meet of Mr. Knox's hounds. It is my belief that 6 out of every dozen people who go out hunting are disagreeably conscious of a nervous system, and that 2 of the 6 are in what is brutally known as a blue funk. I was not in a blue funk, but I was conscious not only of a nervous system, but of the anatomical fact that I possessed large, round legs, handsome in their way, even admirable in their proper sphere, but singularly ill adapted for adhering to the slippery surface of a saddle. By a fatal intervention of Providence, the sport on this my first day in the hunting field was such as I could have enjoyed from a bath chair. The hunting field was on this occasion a relative term, implying long stretches of unfenced moorland and bog, anything in fact save a field. The hunt itself might also have been termed a relative one, being mainly composed of Mr. Knox's relations in all degrees of cousinhood. It was a day when frost and sunshine combined went to one's head like iced champagne. The distant sea looked like the Mediterranean, and for 4 sunny hours the Knox relatives and I followed 9 couple of hounds at a tranquil foot-pace along the hills, our progress mildly enlivened by 1 or 2 scrambles in the shape of jumps. At 3 o'clock I jogged home, and felt within me the new-born desire to brag to Peter Cadogan of the Quaker's doings as I dismounted, rather stiffly, in my own yard. I little thought that the result would be that 3 weeks later I should find myself in a railway carriage at an early hour of a December morning, in company with Flurry Knox and 4 or 5 of his clan, journeying towards an unknown town named Drumcurran, with an appropriate number of horses in boxes behind us and a van full of hounds in front. Mr. Knox's hounds were on their way, by invitation, to have a day in the country of their neighbours, the Curranhilty harriers, and with amazing fatuity I had allowed myself to be cajoled into joining the party. A northerly shower was striking in long spikes on the glass of the window. The atmosphere of the carriage was blue with tobacco smoke, and my feet, in a pair of new Blucher boots, had sunk into a species of Arctic sleep. "Well, you got my letter about the dance at the hotel tonight?" said Flurry Knox, breaking off a whispered conversation with his amateur whip, Dr. Jerome Hickey, and sitting down beside me. "And we're to go out with the harriers today, and they've a sure fox for our hounds tomorrow. I tell you, you'll have the best fun ever you had. It's great country to ride. Fine honest banks that you can come racing at anywhere you like." Dr. Hickey, a saturnine young man with a long nose and a black torpedo beard, returned to his pocket the lancet with which he had been trimming his nails. "They're like the Tipperary banks," he said. "You climb down 9 feet and you fall the rest." It occurred to me that the Quaker and I would most probably fall all the way, but I said nothing. "I hear Tomsey Flood has a good horse this season," resumed Flurry. "Then it's not the one you sold him," said the Doctor. "I'll take my oath it's not," said Flurry with a grin. "I believe he has it in for me still over that one." Dr. Jerome's moustache went up under his nose and showed his white teeth. "Small blame to him. When you sold him a mare that was wrong of both her hind legs. Do you know what he did, Major Yates?" The mare was lame going into the fair, and he took the two hind shoes off her and told poor Flood that she'd kicked them off in the box, and that was why she was going tender. And he was so drunk that he believed him." The conversation here deepened into the trackless obscurities of horse dealing. I took out my stylograph pen and finished a letter to Philippa with the feeling that it would probably be my last. The next step in the day's enjoyment consisted in trotting in cavalcade through the streets of Drumcurran, with another northerly shower descending upon us, the mud splashing in my face, and my feet coming torturingly to life. Every man and boy in the town ran with us. The harriers were somewhat in the tumult ahead, and the Quaker began to pull and hump his back ominously. I arrived at the meet considerably heated, and found myself one of some 30 or 40 riders, who with traps and bicycles and foot people were jammed into the narrow muddy road. We were late, and a move was immediately made across a series of grass fields, all considerately furnished with gates. There was a glacial gleam of sunshine, and people began to turn down the collars of their coats. As they spread over the field, I observed that Mr. Knox was no longer riding with old Captain Hancock, the master of the harriers, but had attached himself to a square-shouldered young lady with effective coils of dark hair and a grey habit. She was riding a fidgety black mare with great decision and a not disagreeable swagger. It was at about this moment that the hounds began to run, fast and silently, and everyone began to canter. "This is nothing at all," said Dr. Hickey, thundering alongside of me on a huge young chestnut. "There might have been a hare here last week, or a red herring this morning. I wouldn't care if we only got what'd warm us. For the matter of that, I'd as soon hunt a cat as a hare." I was already getting quite enough to warm me. The Quaker's respectable grey head had twice disappeared between his forelegs in a brace of most unsettling bucks, and all my experiences at the riding school at Sandhurst did not prepare me for the sensation of jumping a briary wall with a heavy drop into a lane so narrow that each horse had to turn at right angles as he landed. I did not so turn, but saved myself from entire disgrace by a timely clutch at the mane. We scrambled out of the lane over a pile of stones and furze bushes, and at the end of the next field were confronted by a tall stone-faced bank. Everyone, always excepting myself, was riding with that furious valour which is so conspicuous when neighbouring hunts meet, and the leading half-dozen charged the obstacle at steeplechase speed. I caught a glimpse of the young lady in the grey habit, sitting square and strong as her mare topped the bank, with Flurry and the redoubtable Mr. Tomsey Flood riding on either hand. I followed in their wake, with a blind confidence in the Quaker and none at all in myself. He refused it. I supposed it was in token of affection and gratitude that I fell upon his neck. At all events, I had reason to respect his judgment, as before I had recovered myself, the hounds were straggling back into the field by a gap lower down. It finally appeared that the hounds could do no more with the line they had been hunting, and we proceeded to jog interminably, I knew not whither. During this unpleasant process, Flurry Knox bestowed on me many items of information, chiefly as to the pangs of jealousy he was inflicting on Mr. Flood by his attention to the lady in the grey habit, Miss Bobby Bennet. "She'll have all old Hancock's money one of these days. She's his niece, you know, and she's a good girl to ride. But she's not as young as she was 10 years ago. You'll be looking at a chick in a long while before you thought of her. She might take Tomsey some day, if she can't do any better." He stopped and looked at me with a gleam in his eye. "Come on, and I'll introduce you to her." Before, however, this privilege could be mine, the whole cavalcade was stopped by a series of distant yells, which apparently conveyed information to the hunt, though to me they only suggested a Red Indian scalping his enemy. The yells travelled rapidly nearer, and a young man with a scarlet face and a long stick sprang upon the fence and explained that he and Patsy Lorry were after chasing a hare 2 miles down out of the hill above, and ne'er a dog nor a one with them but themselves, and she was lying, beat out, under a bush, and Patsy Lorry was minding her until the hounds would come. I had a vision of the humane Patsy Lorry fanning the hare with his hat, but apparently nobody else found the fact unusual. The hounds were hurried into the fields, the hare was again spurred into action, and I was again confronted with the